The military is often a source of technological and scientific advancements. Arms races can lead to events such as the Cold War, but can also impact everyday life with new technology and pharmaceutical treatments. So today we'll be taking a look at 3 military announcements. China has done human testing to create biologically enhanced super soldiers. Enhanced super soldiers are the themes of novels, movies, and TV. However, this could be a reality in the not-so-distant future. China has reportedly already done human testing to create biologically enhanced super soldiers. According to U.S. intelligence officials, China has carried out testing on members of the People's Liberation Army. In a paper published by the Jamestown Foundation in October 2019, China's military biotech ambitions were examined. The paper, quoting a 2015 article in PLA Daily, stated that Chinese military scientists and strategists have consistently emphasized that biotechnology could become the new strategic commanding heights of the future revolution in military affairs. CRISPR gene editing technology is at the forefront of their strategy. According to this paper, CRISPR technology is in the pipeline of multiple pharmaceutical companies for treating genetic diseases and cancer. It has also multiple uses in agriculture. However, there are multiple ethical questions that surround the use of this technology. When combined with other technological advances, genetic editing could pave the way for the creation of a super soldier. It is worth noting that in most countries this will not happen as it is deemed unethical to use genetic editing in this way, and it is banned by numerous governing bodies. Tampering with DNA could have unforeseen consequences. It is deemed unethical to boost the performance of a healthy human via gene editing. The first humans that had been genetically modified using CRISPR were born in China. A professor in the Department of Biology of the Southern University of Science and Technology in Shenzhen, China, claimed to have used CRISPR to delete CCR5 from human embryos, making them immune to HIV, some of which were later used to create pregnancies. In China, he was found guilty of conducting illegal medical practices and sentenced to 3 years in prison, as he had deliberately violated national regulations on biomedical research and medical ethics. China is rapidly investing in its own biotech landscape, and a lot of CRISPR-Cas9 developments in the global pharmaceutical arena have originated in the country. This could give ample access for the government to test this technology in areas outside of pharmaceutical or agricultural applications. John Ratcliffe, a Republican former member of Congress from Texas and the Director of National Intelligence, stated, "There are no ethical boundaries to Beijing's pursuit of power." Other technologies that could be used to enhance soldiers include nanotech, brain-machine interfaces, bionics, and exoskeletons, which raise fewer ethical questions than genetic modifications. But for now, an enhanced super soldier is likely to stay a hypothetical possibility for now, and gene editing will remain in the area of pharmaceuticals and agriculture. Russia unveils Star Wars armor for infantry. In 2017, a Russian military research center released a video of what looks like a next-generation combat suit. Multiple media outlets referred to the suit as Star Wars-style armor. The suit includes a digital helmet, a bulletproof neck protector, body armor, and exoskeleton amongst other features. The prototype was unveiled at the opening of Russia's largest high prototyping center at the National University of Science and Technology in Moscow. It was developed at the Central Research Institute for Precision Machine Building, a major Russian weapons designer and primary military supplier. According to Russia Today, the armor combines ballistic protection with sensors, a powered exoskeleton, and a heads-up display in the motorcycle-style helmet. The exoskeleton is designed to assist wearers in carrying heavy loads. It can also help with long marches and running. The suit is named Ratnik 3, which means Warrior 3. The suit is comprised of 5 subsystems: life support, command and communication, engaging, protecting, and energy saving. According to reports, the Ratnik 3 is fully operational in anywhere from -22 degrees to 122 degrees Fahrenheit, with the user able to control interior temperature of the suit. The model that was displayed was a concept, but the designers aimed to make it a reality within the next couple of years. Originally stated that it would be ready for manufacture by 2020, this has now been pushed back to 2022. The suit has had multiple publicized updates since its first introduction in 2017. The latest is a watch that can reportedly survive a nuclear blast. It is self-winding and virtually indestructible. There are likely to be further updates released, with one researcher stating that the aim is to include medical technology in the suit, making it able to stop hemorrhaging. The video only shows a static version of the suit, and despite claims that this will be in use in the near future, there is little to prove it is actually functioning. The exoskeleton has been proven to be bulletproof, fireproof, and explosion-proof through tests completed by the Central Research Institute. However, there are programs such as these that are in development for militaries all around the globe. The US was developing the Tactical Light Operator suit, which was likened to Iron Man, but this has since been scaled back. Full-body, intelligent combat suits will still be in development by the military and private companies, with the aim of being the first to have a futuristic product resembling something from science fiction ready for battle. US reveal battlefield-ready robots. Robotics in the battlefield has been talked about extensively over the last decade or two. With advancements in robotics being seen in multiple fields, it is no wonder that we are getting closer to the reality of robots on the battlefield. The US has revealed battlefield-ready robots, although it is worth noting that these are not autonomous humanoid robots, but more along the lines of unmanned vehicles. The Packbot was one of the first robots to enter the battlefield in 2002, which is controlled by what looks like a gamepad and is designed for use by troops and first responders to carry out dangerous missions in high-threat battlefield scenarios. It has since been improved multiple times over. The latest iteration, the 510 Packbot, is a multi-mission tactical mobile robot developed by Endeavor Robotics, which is now part of FLIR Systems. Developed by the same company and ordered by the US military in 2017, is the FLIR Centaur, a man-transportable robotic system increment to solution. According to FLIR, this remotely operated medium-sized system provides a standoff capability to detect, confirm, identify, and dispose of hazards. The Fully Interoperability Profile or IOP-compliant open-architected robot has a standard chassis and modular mission payloads in support of current and future missions. Centaur supports engineers, chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear and explosive ordnance disposable soldiers. This system was originally meant to be fielded by 2021, but the first unit was equipped with the MRES Incorporated 2 in the second quarter of the Army's fiscal 2020. In a press release by the U.S. Army, Brian McVeigh, the Army's project manager for force protection, stated, "During recent conflicts, the Army purchased more than 7,000 unique robotic systems. The MTRS-2 is the first in a series of programs to replace these with a more flexible system." The press release also mentioned the payloads that will be integrated into MTRS-2 will allow for better remote threat detection even in low-light environments, and improved remote interrogation of improvised explosive devices, allowing soldiers to determine the nature of such threats from a safe distance. Battlefield-ready robots will be advancing at a rapid pace, with the introduction of artificial intelligence so these robots can make decisions and potentially the development of humanoid robots that can be used as soldiers. While it is unlikely that militaries will allow artificial intelligence to have those capabilities will be a possibility. Battlefield robots will evolve from unmanned vehicles to something similar to those seen on TV. It is unlikely that robots will replace human soldiers on the battlefield. They will be used in more supportive positions to enhance the capabilities of humans in battle. But what do you make of these military announcements? The International Space Station is one of the most impressive structures we've sent into space. Over 560 people have made it into space, and with new discoveries in technology, it's said that within the next few years that number will increase dramatically, with space agencies looking at introducing space tourism within the next few decades. Couple this with agencies' efforts at colonizing planets such as Mars, and it's fair to say that interest in space is at an all-time high. The International Space Station is one of the most famous spacecrafts that orbits our planet. It's a large spacecraft, and over the last few years, various astronauts have called this place home. One of the most common things for astronauts to do here is take breathtaking photographs of our planet. Interestingly, though, you don't have to visit space to see the same things as astronauts. Around the International Space Station have various cameras, and they allow us to see into the cosmos from the comfort of our homes. In recent years, though, people have been coming forward with strange reports, and the majority of these center on strange things seen close to the International Space Station cameras. UFOs have been seen countless times on live streams, but there are some which have caused more of a stir than others. A NASA live stream from the International Space Station seems to have caught a fast-traveling UFO. What's odd about this one, though, is that it can be seen flying past the live cams at fast speed, but then it suddenly does a tight turn. Online users who saw the video suggested this definitely wasn't a satellite, saying that it was traveling too fast and that satellites don't have the ability to change direction like that. One user even noted that once the unidentified flying object had passed the International Space Station, the camera then starts to pan in the direction of the object, almost as if it was checking on what had just passed. One user said the following about the anomaly. "This is perhaps one of the best videos we have of an unidentified flying object seen close to the space station. Whatever this thing was hitting some serious speed. As others pointed out, though, you can see it veer off to the right once it passes the International Space Station. I've never seen a satellite or anything man-made hit those kinds of speeds. Great capture." End quote. While another person said the following, "These cameras have picked up a variety of different-looking objects, but for me this one is of particular interest. It doesn't just show a random object slowly flying past the space station. This object is traveling really fast, and you don't usually see them change direction like this one did. It's also interesting that the camera panned in the object's direction once it passed." End quote. Or the skeptic said the following, "After looking at the video, what we might be seeing here is a piece of space debris. What people forget is that the space above our planet is littered with debris from old missions." End quote. Others carried on from this and said it might have been something like a meteorite. Or UFO believers said this is the real deal. Various UFO researchers have spoken out about these objects in recent years, have said the space above our planet is littered with these flying objects, saying that some of these even change direction and do tight turns, something that we're unable to do with our current technology. Some have said these strange objects could be watching the human species, while others tried to pass them off as a lens flare or other more common occurrences. Although NASA don't really comment on these types of sightings, in the past they have noted that these objects can be explained, and they usually turn out to be things like space jungle camera anomalies, with them going on to say that every alleged UFO seen above our planets can be easily explained, and the majority of them can be pinned to space dust. NASA researchers have said that space dust can give off the illusion of there being a craft when there isn't one, and when these pieces of space debris get up close to the International Space Station cameras, they can take on the appearance of an unidentified flying object. UFO hunters who spent countless hours watching the live feed still have said this isn't the case and explain that this is a lazy answer as many different objects have been recorded at various distance away from the space station cameras. One thing they've asked NASA to explain is when these objects are seen, why do the cameras normally get shut off? In April 2016, another random object was caught on camera and appeared to fly by the International Space Station. A diamond-shaped object could be initially seen, but as the footage went on it appeared to be changing its shape, and the NASA live feed was randomly cut at the same time. This instantly caused speculation online, with some suggesting that NASA were behind it, and that they didn't want the general public seeing these strange objects. The timing of the lost transmission seemed all too coincidental to viewers, and many were left believing that the International Space Station live cameras were turned off on purpose. In April 2017, another mysterious object caught the attention of UFO hunters. A cylinder-type object entered the view of the camera and was quickly spotted by UFO enthusiasts. Once again, though, skeptics said this was just a man-made object. Other mysterious footage seen on the ISS livestream has gone viral, one of which was when viewers claimed to have seen a mysterious object heading directly towards the International Space Station, before it suddenly disappeared from view. Despite some claiming it was a genuine unidentified flying object, Others suggested that it was nothing more than space junk. What do you make of this interesting video that seems to show a fast-moving object's change direction? Do you think it shows an unidentified flying object? Or do you think it's just a piece of space debris? Although the most popular stories surrounding the extraterrestrial phenomena tend to focus on the topics of alien abduction, sightings of extraterrestrial craft, or supernatural occurrences featuring humanoid creatures, many UFO researchers often forget that some of the strongest pieces of evidence of extraterrestrial intervention appears to center around the disappearance of cattle and subsequent damage to livestock. So today I will be talking about the strange link between thousands of cattle disappearances across the world, and impossible to explain surgical procedures that took place in ways that would be humanly impossible with modern-day technologies. The earliest known written record of bizarre animal surgeries and sudden disappearance of a large number of livestock comes from an official document dated sometime during the early 1600s, when an investigator for the court of James I of England claimed that impossible to explain mass expirations of sheep were being recorded all across London in nearby shires. It was originally believed that the sudden explorations of the sheep could have been caused by neighboring farms competing in market production, alongside hungry travelers that were committing theft as they traveled throughout London, of which was the most heavily populated region during the 1600s. However, when the investigations took place, evidence was found that seemed to reject the original hypothesis. According to the court investigator, the sheep were found to have expired through causes that were otherwise impossible to attribute to human activity. Their organs, meat, and fleeces remained untouched, with only evidence of possible tailor removal, though not confirmed in blood, having been completely drained from the animal with no spillages surrounding the body. Even more difficult to explain was the sheer number of sheep that suddenly expired. The investigator wrote that in some cases, there were more than 100 sheep that suddenly passed away, and no evidence of footprints, tracks, or spillages that could point towards a group of people having perpetrated the crime. When the investigator asked around the local regions that were at the epicenter of this series of sheep disappearances and explorations, many attributed the sight of fireworks nearby to have been the possible cause. Some believed that the fireworks could have scared the sheep and caused them to pass away in fright, whereas others believed that the lights they'd seen in the sky could have had a more sinister purpose. The court ended the investigation with the following comment. About the city of London and some of the shahs adjoining, whole explorations of sheep have been made, in some places to number 100, in others less. When nothing is taken from the sheep of their tallow in some inward parts, the whole carcasses and fleece remaining still behind. Of this sun-dried conjectures, but most agree that it tended towards some fireworks. The phenomenon would continue for several decades before ending entirely. The most interesting aspect of these sheep disappearances, however, seem to bear remarkable resemblance to modern-day cattle disappearances and possible extraterrestrial intervention. When researching into mass livestock explorations, it became obvious that cattle disappearances and surgeries are a fairly recent development, with the first recorded instances beginning during the 1800s to modern day. It's theorized that the sudden change of livestock being targeted from sheep to now cattle appears to match directly with the world market and primary source of meat production during these times. When sheep disappearances, surgeries, and unexplained explorations were occurring, the main meat export around the world centered around sheep populations. It's only been over the last couple of centuries that the role of cattle has slowly changed for the purpose of meat consumption. During the 1600s to the late 1700s, when recorded instances of sheep explorations were occurring, cattle were predominantly used for labor and secondarily used for milk production, eating the meat of cattle, creating leather from their hide, or using their bones for objects were only the product of a cattle that had passed away due to natural causes or old age. Could it be that extraterrestrial visitors switched from now stilling sheep from around the world to now modern-day cattle to better understand the main meat consumption darts of our entire species? The early SNOM study into cattle explorations began in the state of Ohio back in 1966. When an investigator known as John Kill began to look into a series of unexplainable cases that were recorded around the upper Ohio River Valley. The cattle seemed to have passed away due to bizarre circumstances that were otherwise impossible to have occurred naturally. Instances of animal autopsies showed that a number of cattle had passed away shortly after falling from a great height. Despite the fact that the pastures were wide expanses of flat, endless land with no heights great enough to have caused the injuries recorded. Other instances noted that the cattle appeared to have been cut up with precision tools that created perfectly straight lines in their livestock in their thick hinds that would have required special surgical equipment. A list of consistent findings were the following. Many of the livestock explorations were made with clean surgical cuts that would have required precise tools and equipment. Many of the cattle found had been completely drained of blood, showed no sign of spillage in the surrounding area or any form of clotting surrounding their wounds. Over 90% of the cattle that was targeted was between the age of 4 to 5 years old. No footprint spillages, tracks, or even evidence of any animal nearby could be found. These discoveries and subsequent livestock investigations stayed within the farming communities for several decades, without the general public aware of the events until the 1970s. When investigators began to uncover bizarre findings. The investigation that became publicized surrounding strange animal surgeries was the famous event known as the Lady Incident, that occurred on the night of September back in 1967. According to the King family, Harry King, the son of Agnes King, found the family of the 3-year-old horse named Lady. The skin surrounding the head and neck of the animal had been completely removed with cuts that were far too precise to have been caused by a predator. Blood was not at the scene, and there were absolutely no tracks of any kind surrounding the body, including Lady's horse tracks that suddenly disappeared more than 100 feet from the body, as if the animal had been running but was lifted off the ground. Oddly enough, several small holes were punched into the ground, as if there were shot holes that carried a substantial weight that landed nearby, and 2 large bushes had been found crushed completely flat. When the story surrounding the Lady Incident was published in the local paper, it was the first ever recorded livestock investigation that had been associated with a possible extraterrestrial encounter. Following investigations grew to be far more peculiar. In June of 1976, when investigating the sudden exploration of a 3-out cow in the Rio Aribe County of New Mexico, investigators discovered what was described as a trail of suction cup-like impressions that led away from the recovered body. These impressions in the ground appear to be in tripod form, with each cup being roughly 4 inches in diameter, 28 inches apart, and suddenly disappeared around 500 feet away from the body of the young cow, with no other signs of tracks surrounding the animal. Although skeptics originally believed the incident was playing off heightened fears of extraterrestrial causes, with the perpetrator appearing to have used a contraption to have created the indentations on purpose, with no other signs of a classic livestock case, similar incidents with suction cup-like indentations would be found all across the state following the Rio Aribe incident. 2 years later, within the same state of New Mexico, a case involving an 11-month-old bull would bring the livestock investigations of substantial piece of evidence of something not of this world interfering with the animals and their genetic makeup. According to the report made on the 24th of March back in 1978, Mr. Manuel Gomez of Dulce, New Mexico, alerted the New Mexican police of his prized 11th-month-old bull having been the victim of a coordinated attack. They found consistent details matching past investigations, such as precise cuts that would have been made only with precision instruments and surgical equipment, its reproductive organs completely removed, and a lack of blood to be found anywhere on the scene. On top of these consistent reports, the police found another peculiar aspect surrounding the bull, when the team began looking at the organs for signs of predators of surgical markings. According to the New Mexican police officer Gabriel L. Vidires, they were quoted as saying the following, although the police officer could not have known at the time what the discovery entailed. Today in the medical field we are familiar with what's referred to as GODARs. A ghost heart is a heart that's been completely decellularized, with all of the red blood cells and blood vessels removed from the heart, giving it a white, almost transparent ghostly appearance. The only time a human heart is turned into a ghost heart is to prepare the heart for a donor transplant, to prevent the body from rejecting the heart due to incompatible blood cells, or a reaction from the antigens of the blood from the donor cells. In essence, this means the blood was drained from the animal to such an extent that the organs underwent a decellularization process. Shortly after this find, The FBI took over the investigation and sent the organs to 2 independent private research laboratories to study the samples and bring back any information surrounding their chemical composition. In the research file, the FBI document outlines the following. The liver was checked against a healthy food market liver, which showed a difference. The 11th-month-old bull's liver contained no copper and 4 times the amount of phosphorus, zinc, and potassium. No explanation for this condition is available. Also, the blood which came off the nose when it was presumably dropped was light pink in color. This blood did not clot after several days. The hide on the animal was brittle and felt a touch like parchment paper. The flesh underneath the hide was pinkish in color. A probable explanation for the pinkish blood is a control type of radiation, used to expire the animal according to radiation experts. The red corpuscles are destroyed, leaving the pale pinkish color. All of the toxicological findings on the blood are negative because of the dissemination of the radiation. It's believed that this type of radiation is not harmful to humans. Although approximately 7 people who visited the site complained of nausea and headaches. End quote. With this finding, it becomes obvious that the sudden expiration of the livestock are not caused by the average citizen performing a hoax or any kind of wildlife or predator. As the instruments needed are so precise and the perpetrators have demonstrated the use of radiation capabilities that surpass even modern-day understandings of targeted radiation effects. Additionally, there appears to be a consistent harvesting of organs related to reproduction, organs relating to dietary processes, and large amounts of blood, all of which would be necessary for detailed studies of an animal, its diet, its hormone levels, its quality of health, and any additional data required. This could very well mean that the cause for such livestock interferences from extraterrestrial intelligence could be detailed large-scale studies over generations surrounding our food production, domesticated animals, and the dietary changes of our population. So what do you think of the strange link between livestock disappearances and unidentified flying objects? Do you have your own theories as to what could be the connection? A few days ago, an interesting video started to show up on various online groups. It shows the Sakajima volcano erupting. However, online users started to notice that something seemed off about the footage. According to the website that monitors this volcano, it states the following. Sakajima is one of the most monitored and observed volcanoes in Japan. Seismograph stations have been installed at 18 locations on the island of Kato University, Japan Meteorological Agency, the Sumi River National Highway Office, and Kagoshima University. And there's also a large number of observation stations off the island. Ground deformation is under continuous observation, and various technology has been installed in tunnels, as well as GPS. Kaito University, along with the Osamo River National Highway Office, has created a 200-meter observation tunnel, and Kaito University Geoinformation Authority of Japan and the Japan Meteorological Agency have installed GPS at 24 locations. However, after online users slowed down the live cam and zoomed in, they were able to see a bright green object hit the volcano before it erupted. This in turn started to cause a variety of different theories to be put forward. Some users suggested this technology is currently being used by militaries across the world, and this particular beam was actually part of an energy weapon. The idea is that these energy beams can be used by the military to attack a target, with some saying they can also be used for things like weather modification. Those who saw the video said you can very clearly see a green beam of light hit the volcano. Then, a matter of seconds later, the volcano starts to erupt, saying that it seems too much of a coincidence. One user said the following, "I've seen these types of videos before, and when these beams hit the objects they were aiming for, it normally causes them to erupt or catch on fire. I'm sure that the military are messing around with this tank, as it's not the first time these beams have been recorded." End quote. While one skeptic said the following, others though went down the route of suggesting that this beam caused the volcano to erupt, and went on to say this isn't the first time that a strange beam has caused a reaction to the object it's hitting. Amateur researchers that have looked into the phenomenon have said that these beams have also been seen in videos of things like bush and forest fires. However, it's important to note that as of right now, There's no proof these beams of light are responsible for the fires. Some have just found it interesting how these alleged energy beams have been photographed during and just before a fire breaks out. As mentioned, some don't believe these sights are random or caused by camera anomalies, but suggest that the government is behind these beams, and that they're also using HAARP technology to create them. HAARP, also known as the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, is a little known yet critically important U.S. military defense program, which has generated quite a bit of controversy over the years in certain circles. Though denied by HAARP officials, some researchers allege that secret capabilities of HAARP are designed to forward the U.S. military's goal of achieving full-spectrum dominance. What's strange is that a few years back amateur researchers said the United States may achieve this by the year 2020. Others have even said that HAARP can and has been used for weather modification to cause earthquakes and tsunamis. When strange shapes appear in the sky, people tend to blame HAARP, suggesting that they're possibly testing new technology. The University of Alaska Fairbanks stated the following on their website. HAARP is the world's most capable, high-power, high-frequency transmitter for the study of the ionosphere. The HAARP program is committed to developing a world-class ionospheric research facility consisting of the following. The Ionospheric Research Instrument, a high-power transmitter facility operating in the high-frequency range. The Ionospheric Research Instrument can be used to temporarily excite a limited area of ionosphere for scientific study. A sophisticated suite of scientific or diagnostic instruments that can be used to observe the physical processes that occur in the excited region. Observation of the processes resulting from the use of the program in a controlled manner will allow scientists to better understand processes that occur continuously under the natural stimulation of the sun. End quote. Although this sounds like science fiction, humans are able to modify the weather. And interestingly, this has been happening since the 1940s. Scientists have said they can use clouds to rain on certain areas that are lacking water. Interestingly, the Navy has this laser technology, and even went on to say the following. There can be multiple laser systems mounted on the back of an aircraft, with each laser system generating a ghost image, so that there would appear to be multiple aircrafts present. This was in response to the latest tech being used by the Navy, in order to create the illusion of there being multiple aircrafts in the sky at once. It's also been announced that the U.S. Army is going forward with plans to create an extremely powerful laser weapon. The indirect fire protection capability, high energy, is said to be a 300 upward kilowatt weapon. It's interesting to note that at this moment in time, the United States Navy currently uses this technology. However, the laser weapon they use is nowhere near as powerful as this one that's in development. In fact, it's reported that this new laser weapon will be over 10 times more powerful than the one the United States Navy is using. They've reported that these laser weapons will be mainly used to tackle things like incoming missiles. It's very clear then that the military is very interested in this technology. They want this tech to be used by all three of the main services. One of the main reasons for wanting this technology is because of how efficient it is. The lasers are incredibly accurate, and you don't need to keep reloading. So what do you guys make of this mysterious video? And do you think this green beam caused the volcano to erupt? Or do you think that what people are seeing is just a video anomaly? One might think that after centuries of technological advancement by scientists and researchers, we would have finally begun to understand the planet we live on and the impact that we have on it. And while at times it seems like that may be true, just when we think we know as much as we can, a discovery will turn our knowledge on its head and make us realize that, despite the wealth of information out there, there is still so much that we don't yet know. So today, we'll be taking a look at 3 recent Antarctic discoveries. Antarctic Lake is full of life. Antarctica is known for being a place where life does not flourish. Although creatures such as penguins, seals, and krill do inhabit the barren land, most of these species do not live there year-round and migrate elsewhere to escape the totally inhospitable and brutal winter. When researchers visit, the conditions are so extreme that they must take intense precautions to prevent hypothermia or worse. The last thing that any of these researchers expected to find was an area actually teeming with life, But that is exactly what they stumbled upon. Under an ice sheet about 3,500 feet thick lies a lake about 50 feet deep and 54 miles square. Researchers interested in studying this lake used drills and hot water to break through the layer of ice and take 15 gallons of water samples and a sediment core over 15 feet long from the dark water below. What these samples revealed surprised the researchers. Study and analysis determined that the subglacial lake was positively teeming with bacterial life, and the samples taken contained an average of 10,000 bacterial cells per milliliter. Although this number may seem paltry in comparison to the 1 million bacterial cells per milliliter in samples taken from the ocean for a totally sunless underground lake, the numbers are astonishing. The fact that there is such a relative abundance of organic matter means that the lake could very likely be supporting other, more complex life forms, which the research expedition will begin to search for soon. A nearby subglacial lake also revealed abnormally high levels of bacteria during an expedition in 2013, which further validates these more recent findings and leads researchers to theorize that the lakes were at one point connected to the larger ocean thousands of years ago, and thus have remnants of carbon deposits from early photosynthesizing organisms that allow the modern-day bacteria to survive. The discovery of such a surprising abundance of life forms is important to researchers for two reasons. The first is that it gives hope and guidance to the search for extraterrestrial life forms, especially on Mars, which has evidence of dried-up underground saltwater lakes not unlike the one uncovered in the Antarctic. The second benefit of this discovery for researchers is that it provides important information about the history of Antarctica and what that now uninhabited place might have looked like thousands of years ago. Scientists who are studying these underground lakes believe that there could be over 400 such examples scattered throughout Antarctica, and rather than a gigantic ice sheet covering the Earth's surface, the barren land is actually more like a frozen wetland with rivers and lakes as big as some of the Amazonian bodies of water. Further analysis of the subglacial lakes will continue to shed more light on what might actually be a more complex ecosystem than anyone has yet realized. Melting glaciers reveal undiscovered island near Antarctica. Antarctica is not a place that generally comes to mind when thinking of discovering new landscapes, but the truth is that the large glacial ice sheets actually effectively conceal the more permanent land masses that lie unseen below. As the glaciers melt and the floating shelf of ice dissipates, researchers going on expeditions through the Antarctic are able to discover new landforms and islands that have been previously hidden below the ice. This was the case with Sif Island, which was uncovered as the Thwaites Glacier, which is known as the Doomsday Glacier because it is one of the fastest retreating Antarctic glaciers melted and revealed underlying rock. Now the newly uncovered landmass rises above sea level and is made of granite, although it is covered almost entirely by the remnants of the ice shelf layer. Sif Island, named for a Norse goddess of the earth, was discovered on February 26, 2020 by researchers with the International Thwaites Glacier Offshore Research Project. When 4 researchers were moving through the Antarctic waters near Pine Island Glacier, they noticed rocks showing through the ice and were able to land and confirm that the formation was indeed an island. The rocky outcropping makes for a small volcanic granite, covered almost entirely by a retreating ice shelf and a few seals. The researchers who discovered and are studying the island originally believed that the ice covering the island was from an iceberg that had lodged itself on the rocks and finally melted enough that the granite itself could be seen. But further study led them to hypothesize that the ice was actually once a part of the Pine Island Glacier ice shelf, which is a field of floating ice that covers part of the ocean where it extends from the edge of the glacier. The Pine Island Glacier and the Thwaites Glacier, whose retreating form revealed Sif Island, are the 2 largest glaciers on the Antarctic Peninsula and are at the center of one of the fastest warming areas of the planet. The massive bodies of ice are melting and shrinking at a rate faster than new ice can form, greatly diminishing the coastline of the continent and allowing underlying granite islands, such as Sif Island, to be uncovered. Sif Island is the only rock formation of its kind for 65 kilometers in any direction. Although with the increasingly prevalent glacial melts caused as a direct result of global warming, more of its kind are sure to emerge. Once the island was located, researchers used archived satellite images to track the emergence of the rock from the ice, and predict the topographical changes that can be expected with the continuing warming temperatures. Study of Sif Island will also help researchers to study in real time the process of glacial rebound, where a continent underneath a melting glacier rises higher than it was as a result of decreased pressure on the rocks, essentially rebounding from the ice. It is unclear whether this rebound causes further cracking and shrinking of the ice shelf, so scientists are closely monitoring the progress of emerging Surf Island. Although the island will no doubt become an important resource for scientists studying climate change, the fact that it emerged at all is deeply concerning as it speaks to the depth that global warming has impacted Antarctica. Microplastics found for the first time in Antarctic ice. Although some might believe that the glaciers of the Antarctic are relatively untouched by humans, this is becoming further and further from the truth. Not only are the glaciers and ice sheets melting and diminishing at a rapid rate, but scientists have recently discovered tiny pieces of plastic called microplastics in deep ice. The unhappy discovery made by a United States-led team of scientists was described as a punch in the gut, as it details how truly deep and pervasive the pollution of the Earth has become, when even the most remote waters on the planet are impacted. As with pollution and contaminants anywhere, the ecosystems and underwater life will undoubtedly be negatively impacted by the presence of microplastics, and this impact might even be felt by those of us incredibly distant from the freezing tundra of the Antarctic. The discovery of the contamination was made by a team of researchers who described the feeling of finding evidence of human damage in such a remote location by saying, "We had spent weeks looking out at what looks so much like pristine white sea ice floating out on the ocean. When we looked at it up close and we see that it's all very, very visibly contaminated when you look at it with the right tools, it felt a little bit like a punch in the gut." The research team took 18 samples from various depths up to 2 meters at several locations. And in some instances, the plastic contamination wasn't microscopic at all. It was visible throughout the samples. The samples appeared to be at least a year old, and it was theorized that it was blown from far-off oceans, where plastic pollution is much more widespread, and carried through the atmosphere until it was dumped onto the Antarctic during snowfalls. If this hypothesis is correct, the spread of microplastics is not limited to just the locations where polluted ocean waters can reach, but it can in fact turn up anywhere on the Earth. The fact that such small pieces of plastic can be transported through the air without notice raises the question of whether or not we are inhaling microplastics as well, and the effect this will have on humans as well as plants, animals, and sea life. The effects that humans have had on the planet is evident even in the farthest reaches of Earth. But as we learn and discover more and more about that frozen expanse, we are also continuously uncovering beautiful and amazing things about that seemingly impenetrable landscape. But what do you make of these Antarctic discoveries? Whether you think they are a topic of elaborate theories or a subject we are touching closer and closer on each year, UFO sightings have been a point of discussion for decades. From people thinking aliens are coming to investigate Earth to pose a threat, to people thinking UFOs are just planes or lights, there are a wide range of opinions. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at 3 fascinating UFO sightings. Mexico Air Force captured UFOs on radar. The Mexican Air Force stumbled across an unusual encounter when conducting routine surveillance. The radar sighting indicated several unidentified flying objects at the astonishing height of 11,500 feet, prompting many questions, queries, and much confusion. The initial surveillance was keeping an eye out for illegal aircrafts attempting to enter Mexico. The Air Force Group of 8 were using C-26 Merlin aircraft, fully equipped with up-to-date radar technology. This radar infrared device is considered conventional and a standardized, trustworthy piece of equipment, with reliable detection immediately ruling out many people's suggestions surrounding faulty equipment. Unfortunately, neither the Air Force crew nor the mission coordination with air traffic control were able to provide visual confirmation with the radar indicating objects moving by, but no members of the team being able to see these objects firsthand. Despite this peculiar development, the Mexican Air Force reiterated their full confidence in the machines aboard, with 2 radar systems providing the same information, both checked to have been operating entirely as designed. Luckily for us, the radar technology was fully set up with cameras, revealing a potential 11 flying objects that could be seen on the radar. but appeared to be invisible or even non-existent to the naked eye. The media were quick to story, and the radar's images began to circle the internet, showing what looked to be 11 small circular objects weaving between the clouds above Camps, Mexico. These images were greeted with eager eyes by the public, ready to suggest aliens and all sorts of bizarre explanations, with official reports steering clear of this speculation and conjecture. Although the objects in the images looked tiny, the flight commander of the mission suggested that the object could be as large as a 15-story building. When comparisons are drawn between this and the size of airborne objects, the Air Force aimed to track traditionally. Despite the flight commander's keen contribution, the Mexican Secretary of Defense and the Mexican government remained silent, at least in terms of public claims, announcements, or theories. Those in official positions of higher prestige and authority have only confirmed objective matters, including that it was the Mexican Air Force that came across this discovery and that this appears to be factual material. A peculiar result of the strange sighting is that only 2 months after this event, the Air Force commander and the Air Force regional director were demoted, being transferred to posts in lower ranks. Is this a result of expressing their opinions on these UFOs, or perhaps an entirely unrelated scenario? Whether you believe in the alien theories or not, the UFOs above Mexico were certainly present, captured in radar technology's photography, making this unexplained sighting all the more curious and harder for the skeptics among us to refute. UFO Memorial Ingelholm in 1946, Swedish ice hockey player Gustav Carlsson not only saw a supposed UFO landing, but interacted with aliens on May 18th. The ice hockey player has said that when he met the aliens, he was given recipes to create natural medicinal concoctions to keep himself healthy. Carlsson claims that it was this extraterrestrial interaction that gave him the knowledge and understanding to begin to establish pharmaceutical companies, both Allergan and Sunil, advancing modern medicine through the advice of an entirely unrelated species has been a cause for suspicion amongst many critics. Even those who believe in aliens and extraterrestrial life struggled to accept Carlsson's peculiar story, with the information he was allegedly given being thought of as outlandish. Aims to probe a little further, investigating stories of UFO sightings throughout Sweden. Regarding Carlsson's anecdote, the group decided there simply wasn't enough evidence to embrace this claim, ultimately dismissing this 1946 UFO sighting. In spite of the group's ruling, in 1972, a memorial was erected in Kronoskogen, Ingelholm, honoring the odd discovery of natural remedies presented to Carlsson by alien species. The memorial is a concrete model of a UFO above a concrete base, marking the visiting of alien life. The only other UFO memorial within Europe can be found in Poland, where there is a UFO memorial ground in Amelzin. Whether or not you consider aliens to exist or to have presented medicinal information, Carlsson certainly believes he owes credit to another unknown life form for his pharmaceutical companies. Child's witted UFO encounter. The 24th of July, 1948 saw an event that would become an infamous UFO story for decades to come. At 2:45 a.m., 2 pilots were carrying out a standard flight flying an Eastern Airlines DC-3 with 20 passengers aboard, only one of whom was awake. This completely ordinary flight was about to make history. At 2:45 a.m., the plane was flying over Alabama, approximately 20 miles southwest of Montgomery, when something unusual took the pilots by surprise. In an official statement, Childs, one of the pilots, described a wingless aircraft that disappeared into the clouds above, as appearing in front of them, giving the pair an awfully close encounter with the potential spaceship. Childs stated there were no winds present, and that craft had been fairly large with 2 rows of windows, which indicated an upper and lower deck. He described a bright light coming from within the UFO's interior. This report aligned very clearly with that of Whitted, who has added that the object was cigar-shaped, reaching 100 feet in length. The pair saw this craft for about 10 seconds, grasped in confusion, shock, and awe. Fortunately, there was another witness to this strange happening, with one passenger remaining awake, who described seeing a bright object shoot past his window, though he offered no further description. Within just hours, the pilots had drawings sketched out and were sharing their remarkable, albeit puzzling story in both the newspaper and in radio interviews, with headlines the following day reading, "Atlanta pilots report wingless sky monster." Within these media appearances, the pair detailed that the encounter had been uncomfortably close, before the spaceship simply zoomed up into the clouds. The president of Boeing Aircraft, William M. Allen, explained that the men's description of this mysterious object did not align with any U.S. crafts or machines. This was soon followed up with the General George C. Kenney, confirming that the U.S. Army did not have equipment like what the pilots saw, but how he wished they did. Despite many UFO claims having been made in the past, the Charles Whitted incident has held up with a little more rigor, with Air Force investigators giving more consideration and credibility to this sighting than many others. The explanation for this incongruity came from the high status of Charles and Whitted as Air Force officers who served throughout World War II, with McKelvey the passenger witness also being an Air Force veteran. Even though there was a great deal of investigating, no concrete explanations were presented. Instead, a confidential document holding the title, Estimate of the Situation, was compiled aiming to explain the UFO sighting, and concluding statements suggested it was an interplanetary object, although this did not sit well with officials. The alternative theories proposed by some included the notion that this odd UFO was a product manufactured a little closer to home by USA's Cold War rival. With the space race officially beginning in 1955, it isn't impossible for the early steps of the Soviet Union to have begun in 1948. Other ideas to explain this UFO sighting without reverting to a frightening interplanetary solution include a weather balloon, a mirage, or according to the final Air Force conclusion, a fireball or bright meteor. Possible answer to the question, what about the lights? Is a theory known as the airship effect in which unrelated lights and imagery may appear to be part of the same item, especially within the night sky. Nonetheless, with dozens of new ideas being pushed forward, Childs and Whitted stuck to their initial tale, with some slight amendments. 20 years later, in an interview, Whitted elaborated on the original account, suggesting that the object didn't dash into the clouds, like the duo had said at first, but rather disappeared on the spot without a trace. Even 70 years later, we remain puzzled as to the genuine events of the 24th of July, 1948, and maybe we will never know what the two Atlanta pilots saw. If you have encountered alien life yourself, wholeheartedly believe these stories others share or are completely cynical, there is an angle for you to take when looking at these unconfirmed and exciting UFO instances and sightings. Perhaps there will be more to follow, or maybe alien life will make contact with us here on Earth. But what do you make of these fascinating UFO sightings and stories? The world is very vast and diverse, with so many different biomes and environments that scientists and explorers remain in awe with every new finding. It is ripe for unearthing, and whether it's the sea, the desert, or jungle, there's always something fresh to be discovered, either from the natural environment itself or added by humans. You would think that a sighting of a mysterious face in a cliff would be enough to draw attention from many people and lead to its quick discovery. But that simply wasn't the case, with the giant face carved into a mountainside in Canada's Pacific Rim National Park reserves, Broken Group Islands in British Columbia. The face in the rocks was first discovered in 2008 by a kayaking tourist who'd been exploring the Broken Group Islands in British Columbia. Although she gave the general location of this spotting to the Parks Canada, it took years before it was discovered once again. A man by the name of Hank Gus finally found it in 2015, after 2 years of dedicated searching for this carving. Hank Gus worked as a beachkeeper, meaning he was responsible for giving orientations to kayaking tourists and visitors. He'd been hearing about the mysterious face etched into the cliff for a few years before. He and a few other beachkeepers managed to find it together. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of this discovery is the fact that the face in the cliff provides very little accessibility. It's 40 feet from the bottom up, about 20 feet to 25 feet from the top down, and surrounded by rock cliffs on each side. This means it would be extremely difficult for someone, or a group of people, to access and carve it into the cliff. Not to mention, shaping the rock alone would be a hassle in itself. The face is about 7 feet tall and resembles a familiar character of the First Nation, an Aboriginal group in that area. The face is referred to as yugi, which symbolizes the blowing of a wind and the sharing of ancestral histories with those presently alive, keeping their spirits alive. This face can be seen on a wood carving on the door of one of the administration offices. Experts are still unsure about whether the face in the cliff is a man-made or a natural and remain curious about the origins of this stone face. The island, referred to as Rikes Island and its rocky cliffs and surrounding area, is far too dangerous for anyone to be able to get a better, clearer look at the face. It was difficult to find to begin with because of this very reason. The area is only accessible by boat, and access can be difficult, especially under risky sea conditions. Stated that it can't be said definitely whether or not it's a natural or man-made occurrence. So to the awe and interest of many, questions still remain, but one stands out the most. Where did the face come from? For inch parasitic wasp. There might not be much that frightens you more than the thought of wild rampant wasps. That is, until you hear about the parasitic wasp found in Kabul National Park in Uganda, Africa. These large wasps were discovered in the jungle by Finnish researchers from the University of Turku in Finland, and they've measured up to 4 inches long. These wasps have only been discovered twice before. Once in 1930 and later again in 1980. They were found in unusually large numbers of both male and female variations. This time, however, is different. The scientists have managed to find them within a large community, and among them, 2 brand new species were found as well. Researchers were able to capture and examine almost 456 of these boss specimens by capturing them in a tent-like trap. The wasps fly into the fabric and then travel upwards, getting caught inside a glass bottle. The new wasp species were named the EP Hisarquagga, after a zebra because of its pale, black and white stripes, and after one of the scientist's wife. Although they sound frightening enough, these insects, which are part of a different family, are actually harmless to humans because they can't sting. The wasps are less harmless the habitat they reside in. And strangely enough, this is due to their egg-laying habits. In addition to their length, it was discovered that these insects are orange or black in color, and that the females in the species have very long ovipositors. Ovipositors are pipes that come out of the rear end of these creatures and are used to drill through wood, stab or paralyze other insects, and to lay eggs, explaining why the males may not have them. These wasps use their ovipositors as means to inject their eggs into beetles and other insects, like certain wasps which live inside rotting and decayed wood. The mother wasp first injects poison into the host insects, paralyzing and rendering them weak and defenseless. The wasp infants then begin to eat the host insect's internal organs. As the host passes away, the larva emerges. It continues to develop inside a cocoon before emerging again as a full-fledged wasp, going on to repeat the process. It's astonishing that these creatures have only been discovered a couple of times before, and a great accomplishment to scientists and researchers looking to gain more information on the species now. Sometimes these discoveries can happen slowly, and then all at once, as happened in this instance, and discoverers are elated about this community of wasps finally found in large numbers. The Stonehead of Guatemala. Over 50 years ago, a monolith resembling a perfect image of a Caucasian face with exact proportions and fine features was discovered. The carving gained traction rapidly, as it was carved so precisely that many were confused of its origins and making. It was considered strange, as the features of this face didn't resemble those known to the area in the deep jungles of Guatemala, those of pre-Hispanic races of America. The discovery first emerged due to a correspondence between the owner of the land where the head was found and Dr. Oscar Rafael Padilla Lara, a PhD of philosophy, lawyer and notary, Republican. In 1987, the owner sent a photograph to Dr. Lara claiming that it was taken in the 1950s, with a description and a note that said, "Thin lips, a large nose and its face directed to the sky." The story and photograph were printed in a small article in a newsletter known as The Ancient Skies, and was then seen by an explorer by the name of David Hatcher Childress. Confused about the face, Childress tracked down Dr. Lara, who had found the owners of the land, the Bina family. The site of the monolith turned out to be 10 kilometers from a small village in South Guatemala. Unfortunately for the pair, however, what they found was quite unlike the photograph they'd received. It turned out the face had been destroyed and ruined by revolutionaries about 10 years before their arrival. It was used for target practice by anti-government rebels. The eyes, mouth and nose were completely desecrated, leaving nothing but a neck and disfigured face empty of its once perfect features. Still, the two men gathered what information they could. They measured the monolith's height to be somewhere between 4 and 6 meters. Despite the destruction of the face itself, interest in it didn't completely fade out. A few years later, the mystery was picked up again by filmmakers and draped in even more questions and obscurities. The producer released a signed document by a Guatemalan archaeologist. This asserted that the carved monolith could not have been the work of pre-Hispanic civilizations. They suggested that the face may have been carved by an extraterrestrial being or alien, stating that it was created by an extraordinary and superior civilization with awesome knowledge of which there is no record of existence on this planet. The publication gave way to more skeptics and critics than believers. This threw the entirety of the discovery and its information into question. Nevertheless, it was agreed the giant head did exist, as it seemed in the photograph at one point. Was no evidence pointing to the falsification of the photo and its description. The monolith being genuine was believable. The region in which it was found stood famous for its stone heads. The problem still remains, however. The stone face shown in the pictures is unlike the others, in both style and features. Because of this, many question where it came from and who it was created by. Perhaps we won't know. The wasps and the two stone-carved faces prove there's much more to this supposedly small world than we realize. The Earth's history, both natural and man-made, is full of surprises. All we can do is find out as much as we can about what we find, and hope that those after us can add to our discoveries and research in time. So what do you make of these jungle discoveries? Space has always been an intriguing dream for humankind. There is a yearning to understand the origins of the universe when you look up at the stars. There's a reason why we know more about space than we do our own oceans. It's more fun for us to fantasize about aliens and space travel than dark ocean floors. During the Cold War, there was a race between the USA and the then Soviet Union to reach space first. We achieved so much scientific progress in those years through the intense competition alone. Although we continue to learn more information every day, lack of government funding for space exploration has considerably slowed down the process for both nations, and thus the world. The U.S. carefully maintains its hold over space and its satellites, but no longer prioritizes new ventures. However, there is a new leader arising. China has been investing heavily in its space and science programs to lead the charge in a renewed effort to learn more about space and advance their technologies. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at 3 mysteries and claims to come from China. Mystery objects. In May 2014, multiple large objects fell from space and landed in China. These mystery objects landed in the city of Chijihua in the northeastern province of Heilongjiang. Fortunately, no one was hurt by the pieces. This province borders with Russia's Far East, so it was quickly assumed by experts to be space debris from a Russian rocket or satellite. Coincidentally, Russia had just unsuccessfully launched a satellite from the Baikonur Space Center in Kazakhstan around the same day. The communication satellite was meant to connect with their other satellites and deliver internet to the more remote Russian regions that lack fast communication methods. However, just 9 minutes after launch, the rocket's control engine failed and it quickly burned in the upper atmosphere. It seems that not all of the rocket and satellite were destroyed though. While most of it burned, some debris fell and made its way into China. The China National Space Administration conducted an analysis on the mystery objects and concluded that they had indeed come from Russia's failed satellite. This launch failure was quite the embarrassment for the Russian government. Less than 50 years ago, they were considered leaders in the space industry. They launched the first artificial satellite, Sputnik, at a time when no one was expecting and shocked the world. Their accomplishments spurred the technological and cultural developments of the space age. They were able to do more at that time with less technology than we have now. To make it even worse for them, the satellite cost Russia 150 million euros to build. China claims to be building an artificial sun. China has revealed their plans to create a nuclear fusion reactor that will reach extreme temperatures similar to those found at the sun's core. They claim that their artificial sun will be able to burn up to 360 million degrees Fahrenheit, about 12 times hotter than our sun. Nuclear fusion on the sun occurs when two hydrogen nuclei fuse together to form a heavier helium nucleus, thus releasing an immense amount of energy during the process. In order to recreate this process of nuclear fusion, China is using HL-2M tokamak, which is the largest kind of fusion reactor found today. Their device is called the Experimental Advanced Superconducting Tokamak. The name tokamak comes from a shortened version of the Russian translation for toroidal magnetic confined. A tokamak is a ring-shaped device in which the hydrogen is heated to extreme temperatures and turns into plasma. The temperamental plasma is contained in the device through the use of magnetic fields. However, the plasma is prone to bursts and can easily damage the device. Essentially, a tokamak is a donut that's very difficult to control and has taken a long time to be used at such a large scale. Called a stella rata. They say that China's tokamak is different than others due to the flexibility of its magnetic field. It provides more protection from the plasma to the reactor walls, resulting in a more stable device. China first began working on it in 2006, and it took until 2018 for the construction to near completion, and it to reach the halfway point of 180 million degrees Fahrenheit. The scientists working on it claim that it will be fully operational and reach the claimed 360 million degrees Fahrenheit by the end of 2020. So why is China creating an artificial sun? What will they use it for? Their goal is to create a stable plasma fusion reaction that can continuously maintain those extreme temperatures by itself. They want to use the power it generates as an energy source for commercial practices. If successful, their artificial sun would be a massive jump in progress towards a clean and nearly limitless energy. It would also be an immense financial profit for them. While the arc generator imitated the power of the tesseract to provide clean, renewable energy, the experimental advanced superconducting tokamak will imitate the sun's nuclear fusion. The researchers have taken about 14 years for their tokamak to be able to reach half the expected temperature for short intervals of time before destabilizing. Although the 2020 pandemic might have slowed the project down, the researchers continue to work towards the goal of it being fully operational. China lands on the dark side of the moon. On January 3, 2019, at around 10:26 a.m. Beijing time, China's robot spacecraft successfully landed on the far side of our moon. The spacecraft Chang'e puts China in the running for a space leader as it is the first in history to land in the South Pole Aitken Basin, which is an area of the moon that is never visible to Earth. This dark side of the moon is unexplored territory. No one has attempted to reach it before. The moon is the Earth's only natural satellite rotating every 27 days or so. We are actually only able to see approximately 60% of the moon's surface. The 40% of the dark side of the moon is always hidden from us. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, have spent the past 50 years collecting images of the far side of the moon through various satellites and space probes. So although we have known for some time what the other side roughly looks like, this landing makes history and will reveal even more detailed information about the moon and space that we did not know prior. There is no direct communication link to the robotic spacecraft, so in order for the lunar images it captured to reach Earth, it has to be rerouted through another satellite that Chang'e 4 was launched on December 7, 2018 and arrived in the moon's orbit 5 days later. It then took the rest of the month to lower itself onto the surface. Named after a Chinese goddess who supposedly lived for millennia on the moon, its mission is to explore the massive South Pole Aitken Basin. This basin is one of the largest known impact craters in our whole solar system. The distance from its tallest peaks to its very depths is nearly 15 kilometers. Mount Everest only reaches around 8.9 kilometers. Chang'e 4 will collect soil samples to analyze the structure and composition of the moon above and below its surface. What's even more amazing is that Chang'e 4 brought live plant species from Earth that it will use to plant a garden. It carries cotton, rapeseed, potato, yeast, and the small flowering plant Arabidopsis. Apart from gathering samples and data, its other mission is to attempt to grow the first plants on the moon. The China National Space Administration also explained that since there is no radio interference on the dark side, there is opportunity for spacecraft to observe the stars and nebulae using radio astronomy. Even though the moon has been explored since the 1960s, there is so much information still unknown to us. China first announced its moon landing plan in 2016. Their space program has grown exponentially since their first astronaut launching in 2003. And over time, they have managed to send multiple robotic spacecrafts onto the moon, albeit on the light side. They have also launched various satellites and space stations and even a Mars rover that they expect to land in February 2021. It's amazing how far we've come technologically. Alternative energy sources, interstellar exploration, space gardens, next up, space travel. All we need now is to clean up the junk and debris still floating in space. With the Chinese government heavily funding their space program and encouraging new developments, perhaps it will inspire some competition within the other countries to once again look up at the sky and delve back into space exploration. But what do you make of these projects from China and how they've expanded their knowledge about space? Even with the most modern science and technology that the world has ever witnessed, the planet's oceans, lakes, and great bodies of water still remain a mystery. According to the National Ocean Service, more than 80% of our ocean alone is completely unobserved, unexplored, and unmapped. Within these dark and deep waters that cover over 70% of the globe, scientists and researchers are investigating and uncovering daily. So today we'll be taking a look at 3 recent discoveries. Inside the Paris Canal. Paris is a city in France with a wealth of history, from the uncharted catacombs to the famous Eiffel Tower. Less recognized is the Canal Saint-Martin, which is known for its incredibly old but beautiful waterways. Over the centuries, however, the canal has frequently needed to be cleaned. What gets pulled from the bottom of the waterway reveals thousands of artifacts among the debris. Showcasing humanity throughout the canal's long history begins with Napoleon Bonaparte in 1802, a statesman and military leader who led campaigns during the French Revolution. Because the city's population was growing at exponential rates, the canal was needed to bring access to fresh water and expand business ventures. Funded by taxes on wine, the canal was built. While successful at first, the canal soon couldn't keep up with the speed of the city's growth. Today's present canal, while pretty on the surface, has inadvertently become flowing with garbage at the bottom. None of what lay below for centuries was ever discovered until city authorities decided to completely drain and clean the canal for the very first time since 2001, redirecting over 3.2 million cubic feet of water into the River Seine. Parisian residents gathered to watch as the workers cleaned and walked across the canal, slowly but steadily gathering over 40 tons of garbage that had rarely seen the light of day. Many of those items were small, like the thousands of wine bottles which lay in muddy heaps. Other objects were much larger, such as the thousands of abandoned bikes and mopeds, old and new. For the city, the cleaning of the canal wasn't just a sanitation ritual, but a unique lens into the city's historical past. Workers were able to find old boomboxes, old cameras, a toilet bowl, bathtub, and even rare artifacts dating back to the First World War, such as an unexploded shell, coins, and a car. Modern treasures were discovered too, which included guns, drones, a sewing mannequin, and a wheelchair. Even though attention was focused on the fascinating finds, city workers never forgot about the aquatic creatures that swam alongside. Together, The workers netted almost 5 tons of fish and moved them to another part of the canal that was undisturbed. Although the project's completed cost amounted to $10.3 million, it was a project that served both the residents, the aquatic animals below, and the historical memories of the city for ages to come. Sonar equipment revealed that there was a submerged plane at the bottom of Lake Norman in North Carolina. On a regular day in North Carolina upon the shores of Lake Norman in 2013, a group of firefighters set out for what they thought would be a routine training exercise. However, nearly 100 feet down, they discovered a small sunken plane that was submerged in the deepest part of the lake. They were able to use a technology called side sonar imaging, which allowed them to create an image of large areas across the lake floor. Used as part of a procedure to identify safe diving areas, the discovery of the plane changed the entire scope of the training exercise. The Charlotte Fire Department's dive team quickly jumped into action, swimming down into the man-made lake to learn more about the fallen aircraft. What they found was the single-engine aircraft standing on its nose about 90 feet below. Even though the doors were tightly shut, they found no evidence of any body remains or victims. Yet questions still lingered. Who was the owner of the plane? When did it crash? And how did it happen? To search for answers, the Federal Aviation Administration took over, poring over aircraft ownership records. While a few clues emerged, the case of the sunken plane remained a mystery. Officials believed that the plane crashed around 30 years ago, but a preliminary search through the archives found no reports of any plane crashes in Lake Norman. One theory that emerged was that it might have been an amphibious plane that must have floated away from a dock and sank, unnoticed for so many years, but no leads came from it. However, after news broke out, phone calls came in from prospective owners. A woman named Barbara Anderson believed that the plane was hers. She recalled the moment more than 30 years ago when flight instructors were using it for training. They forgot to put the gear up to lock the plane on the surface and it sank. After thousands of dollars to find the plane again, it was never found. Another lead came in too, this time from a man named Carol Lineberger, who claimed that the plane's owner was his dad, a licensed pilot named John Gibson. He remembered flying around in the plane with his dad as a kid until 2 weeks later when his dad told him that it sank. Others also believed that the plane belonged to John Gibson, man credited with starting the Lake Norman Air Park, who has since passed away. Since the discovery of the plane in 2013, little news has emerged about the final identification of the plane. Last updated on July 9, 2020, the FAA finally confirmed that the plane had been at the bottom of Lake Norman since the summer of 1974. Among the records, it was found that the aircraft was a North Carolina resident that was deceased. As of now, the plane still has not been lifted from the waters. As time goes on, the case of the mysterious sunken plane remains shrouded in mystery. The underwater Stonehenge found underneath Lake Michigan. When most people think of Stonehenge, the familiar prehistoric monument of a ring of standing stones in Wiltshire, England comes to mind. These massive stones have been standing on the surface since 3000 BC, but another recent discovery uncovers a similar structure deep below underwater and far away from England. In 2007, while on the search for shipwrecks, a group of northwestern Michigan college archaeologists came across something big. 12 meters down, they found a set of aligned stones that must have been placed into formation by ancient humans before water covered the area more than 10,000 years ago. They were looking at America's Stonehenge. It was found in the depths of Lake Michigan, which is the largest freshwater lake in the United States. When Mark Holley, professor of underwater archaeology, came across the site, stated he couldn't believe what he saw. It was the position of the stones that led researchers to believe it was unlikely that the formation was naturally occurring. The stones were all the same distance across and were like the ones found in France, England, and the Nabta Player. To get a closer look, a diving expedition was put together to observe the stones. An underwater photographer was able to capture a fascinating find of a mastodon depiction carved upon a stone. were ancient animals that resembled modern elephants and were forest-dwelling creatures that lived in herds and grazed across the land. They disappeared from North America when a mass extinction occurred around 8000 BC, done in part by hunter overexploitation. The carving on the stone suggests that the American Stonehenge had to have been arranged before the mastodons went extinct over 10,000 years ago. Researchers believe that the material consists of a very hard rock called granite. The lines and marks of the mastodon were precisely carved, which raised the question of how ancient humans found materials strong enough to etch onto granite. Among these speculations, there was further evidence that the structure was man-made. Humans were believed to have been present as early as 25,000 years ago, when the lake was once dry land. Around the area when the first Europeans arrived in the 17th century, they came across thousands of prehistoric mounds. Sacred stones, statues, and stone idols have also been sighted in several places, many weighing over 100 kilograms. To this day, the exact coordinates of America's Stonehenge is kept a secret by the local Indian tribes who want to keep an influx of tourists away from their land. There is only one question that remains. How could humans have created such intricate structures over 10,000 years ago? The answer to this unexplained mystery may very well change history as we know it. But what do you make of these amazing discoveries? Ever since humans invented the camera, thousands of iconic photographs have been taken, showcasing some of humanity's best and worst moments. However, cameras have also picked up on some strange things, leading people to study them further. Paranormal researchers have said that one of the best ways to capture an apparition is by using a camera. In recent years, hundreds of photographs have been presented by everyday people, claiming that they've captured a genuine apparition. And what's strange is that the majority of these people didn't even know it was there. It's not until reviewing these photographs that they realized that something was there. This happened with one mother who took a photograph on her phone. The story goes that she was trying to take a photograph of her friends and daughter, but every time she went to take the picture, her daughter said she wanted to leave. The mother was confused by this but told her to stand still while the picture was being taken. Again though, the daughter made a fuss and said she didn't want to be there because the little boy was scaring her. The mother was again confused as there was no little boy in the room. The girl then starts to cry and walk out of the photograph. This is a story all too familiar with parents raising young children, and she thought this was just her daughter acting out. However, after reviewing the photograph, she saw something strange in the left-hand corner. She zoomed in and could see the outline of her face in the gap of her friend's leg. It was then that she realized this may have been what her daughter was referring to, saying that whatever she saw really spooked her. She wanted to leave the group photo as soon as possible. It's been speculated by paranormal researchers that babies and young infants are much closer to the non-physical energy that we all originate from. This spiritual connection with Source enables them to remain open to the vibrations around them. As babies grow, researchers say they lose this close connection, and it almost becomes dormant. Some believe that before birth, a baby's spirit exists in an in-between realm, between their mother's womb and their spirit world. This is, allegedly, why so many young adults claim to see paranormal entities in their younger years. While being young, it's said the veil between their world and the earth realm is very thin, which allows them to see things adults can't. Paranormal experts have said there are some common signs that can indicate that your baby is seeing spirits or sensing spirits around them. One of the most common ones is that the baby frequently stares out a particular spot of a room. Baby is laughing or smiling at something you cannot see. Baby is completely mesmerized by something they see, even when you're doing your best to get their attention, and baby happily laughs and cries when they're alone in their cot. Interestingly, paranormal researchers have said that ghost children are one of most commonly reported apparitions. Going back in 1970, the first old spaghetti factory opened in Gastown. It was known to the locals as a great place to eat and for its atmosphere. However, over time people noticed that strange things would happen inside the restaurant. People would see flickering shadows dart across the room, and hear strange noises seemingly coming from nowhere. It's believed by researchers that 4 ghosts occupy the spaghetti factory, with the most famous of these entities being that of the tram conductor. Many people came forward and said they encountered his spirit, further saying that it's as if he doesn't want to leave the area. People who died here said that one of the most common places to see him was near the old trolley car that was parked inside the restaurant. The trolley was number 53, and going back it belonged to the British Columbia Electric Railway Company's fleet of electric trams. The trolley car was placed in the building in 1969, and it's been debated whether he was attached to the car. Some theorize that something traumatic happened to him, and that's why he hasn't been able to leave. Although this sounds far-fetched, there are those that say paranormal entities can attach themselves to objects, with some of the most famous examples being that of Annabelle and Robert the doll. The next ghost at the old spaghetti factory is known as a mischievous spirit. Those who frequently visited the restaurant said the spirit would often try and scare the public. He was encountered most at night, with some saying they refused to enter the restaurant after seeing him. One woman said that she encountered the spirit in the bathroom, saying that it caused her to never use the bathroom again. She claimed to have heard a creepy laugh coming from one of the stalls. Confused and scared, she asked if anyone was in there and needed assistance. However, instead of getting a response, she saw the ghostly apparition of a boy run past. This apparition was allegedly seen by one of the waitresses who was working a late shift. She claimed that she was packing up and saw a young boy running around the restaurant. Confused and worried that her child had been left behind, she decided to investigate. But when she saw the boy, she realized it was an apparition. The frightening encounter caused her to resign the next day and never return. Others who have worked the late shift have said they've put out cutlery for the next day, but when inspecting them the next morning, some of them had been bent. However, when the waitresses reported this to the manager, when they returned to inspect what happened, the cutlery had mysteriously been turned back to normal. This is one of the reasons why people say a mischievous spirit is responsible for these actions. Interestingly, the restaurant decided to bring in a psychic in order to get to the bottom of what was happening. They confirmed the building has so many apparitions because there was a vortex in the back of the restaurant, and that various ghosts had attached themselves to some of the older artifacts. So what do you make of this photograph? Do you think that ghost children exist? And do you believe that entities have the power to inhabit everyday objects? Soldiers all over the world have traditionally been deployed to a variety of locations, ranging from deepest, darkest forests and scorching brown deserts to blazing war zones and trenches. With such exposure to some of the world's most volatile and secret places, strange things are bound to occur every now and again. But what if one of those missions suddenly took a truly bizarre turn? Various soldiers have come forward in recent years and detailed their strange encounters. I was talking to one person on Reddit who was telling me about their strange encounter. They said the following: "I've been a military man my whole life and have certainly experienced a handful of things I wished I didn't. One interesting encounter I had was when I was deployed to Syria. I don't want to give any specific details away about where I was or what I was doing, but me and my team had a strange encounter that none of us were able to explain. To cut a long story short, I'm aware that the United States is one of the leading countries when it comes to tech, but when me and my friend saw this craft, it was unlike anything we'd seen before. The only way I can describe it is that it looked like a huge pyramid. It was my friend who first spotted the object and called us over to see if we could explain it. We watched as this thing descended around 50 feet, meaning that it was hovering just slightly above the ground. If I had to guess, I would say it's probably around 10 to 15 feet from the ground. But from our point, it looked like it was pretty much resting. This diamond-shaped craft was shiny, silver in color, and reflected everything around it. It reminded me of a huge mirror. We were all mesmerized by this and just watched as this thing descended back into the sky. I've never been one that's really believed in this stuff, but this encounter has stayed with me. I have no idea what this was or who it belonged to. I just thought it was interesting and that I'd share it with you." End quote. Interestingly, Many individuals have come forward and told similar stories, and it's not just other countries where these types of crafts have been encountered. Some of the most well-known and interesting ones have happened close to military bases. Edwards Air Force Base sits amid the dusty plains of the Mojave Desert, home to the Earth's hottest place, Death Valley, where temperatures fluctuate from scorching hot in the summer to freezing cold in the winter. The desert is a hostile and dangerous place, but is also one of America's most fascinating places for a number of reasons. Geographically, the area is unique. Furthermore, the first space shuttle mission, Columbia, landed at Edwards on its return to Earth back in April of 1981. However, there's a reason much more relevant to this video as to why we're talking about this base. Edwards Air Force Base by location and the majority of its purpose is just a regular military installation, but it also serves a joint purpose. The base essentially controls activities at the nearby Homey Airport, also known as Groom Lake, and also more commonly known as Aero 51. One would imagine that some strange things must be seen late at night that far out in the desert, surrounded by nothing but open air and dusty expanses. One night in 1965, an air traffic controller at the base had a strange encounter with what he believed was a flying saucer. In 1965, Edwards, like U.S. Air Force bases all over the country, were on high alert for suspicious activity in the skies. Tension with the Soviet Union was mounting, and the most shocking thing that radar controllers in the Nevada desert could have seen back then would have been a Russian aircraft. However, the objects that appeared above the base, apparently flying very high and very fast, appeared in sets of 7, and looked like pulsating lights against the night sky. Others also stated they traveled in groups of 12. However, the controllers couldn't be sure of what they'd seen, and as a precaution, an F-106A fighter jet was scrambled from the nearby George Air Force Base in Victoriaville. Yet, the strange sights continued to climb into the night sky, far outpacing the fighter jets. Controllers noted that the craft seemed to simply fade away into space, becoming one of the stars. The thing about the Edwards incident is that the eyewitnesses' reports were credible, so the crew at the base must definitely did see something that night. It's just not clear what they saw. We don't know what sort of threat or how bad a threat these supposed UFOs posed. But when the evidence was released only about 15 years ago, people realized that the government had gone to great lengths of the time to cover up these sorts of incidents. UFOs have been a thing of immense fascination across the world for thousands of years, but Americans were amongst the first to take a continued interest in the phenomena. And when multiple soldiers, those who we trust with keeping our safe, are mind-boggled and ultimately convinced by their own sightings, you can't help but think there might be something else out there. These are just a few examples of what military officials have encountered, and there's definitely no shortage of these types of stories. It's interesting when we hear about UFO sightings that have been witnessed by everyday people. But when military officials come forward and share their stories, they seem more credible. This is because these are the people that work around this type of tech, so are used to seeing high-tech military equipment on a daily basis. No matter what your thoughts surrounding these incidents, one thing that can't be ignored is that there are only two possible conclusions to make when it comes to repeated UFO sightings. Either there's a truth within the story or it's false. So what do you make of these interesting reports made by soldiers and military officials? If the best military jets can't keep up with these crafts when pursuing them, then where do you think they're coming from and what do you think they are? Nikola Tesla has been hailed as one of the greatest inventors to have ever lived. Though Tesla would go on to make headlines across many different news outlets for a number of breakthroughs and inventions, there were also a number of articles posted about him during his life that spoke of a far more peculiar side of him. At the time, his unique mind wasn't appreciated, and in some cases people even tried to brand him as a mystic and someone who didn't know what he was talking about. However, these comments didn't stop him, and Nikola Tesla wasn't one to shy away from electricity and being able to harness it. One of his famous quotes was the following: "I've worked out a dynamic theory of gravity in all details and hope to give this to the world very soon." Nikola Tesla has impacted your life in one way or another. For example, electricity, radar, microarrays, the radio. drones, and many other things all came from the great month that was Nikola Tesla. Recently, the FBI has released 64 pages of unreleased documents, and these include things like paper and documents that were collected shortly after Tesla passed away. For many years now, theories have been floating around as to why Tesla's work was collected by the government. Some have said that Tesla's work wasn't important and wouldn't have had an impact on us, and that the ideas and inventions he was working on didn't work or were just made up. So, if this was the case, why did the United States government quickly swoop in and collect his work shortly after he'd passed away? Tesla's work obviously caught the attention of the FBI, as they wanted to come through what he'd been working on. One of the reasons for doing this was to ensure that any of his work didn't get into the wrong hands. For this reason, they decided it would be best if the documents remained in the property of the Office of Alien Property Custodian. This was, however, until the documents and other pieces of Tesla's work mysteriously disappeared after the war. Interestingly, enough discussion had been created that the public was aware of some of these alleged inventions, and it even caused citizens to question Director J. Edgar Hoover about what Tesla had been working on. It's some of these extracts, though, that have caused many people to question why the government would look into this. And not only that, but also keep it a secret. These are some experts from the official FBR documents that got released. This letter will not reach you in time to sight flying saucers over New York on the night of June 13th, from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. But there will again be full-scale operations of flying saucers over all American areas on July 1st. This will be in 3 phases as follows. New York errors July 1st, 9 a.m. Washington, D.C. errors 9:25 a.m. General North American errors 9:25 a.m. Central American errors 9:30 a.m. South American errors 9:35 a.m. Second phase is same errors as above. Beginning at 12 midday July 1st. Third phase full-scale operations over all American areas beginning at 7 p.m. on the evening of July 1st. The above information has been supplied by George King, editor of Cosmic Voice 88, The Drive Manchurian's Fulham Road in London. Also, please note that George King has also published back issues of Cosmic Voice in 1 volume. This is beyond doubt the finest source of messages that we know of. George King is considered the best telepathic contact that the space people have. Although George Fantasso is the funnest we have in America. Margaret Storm has been assigned to certain work with the space people. As follows, she is writing a book, a story of the life of Nikola Tesla and the part his inventions will play in the new age. Much of the data for this book has been supplied to Mrs. Storm through transcripts received on the Tesla set. A radio-type machine invented by Tesla in 1938 for interplanetary communication. Tesla died in 1943, and his engineers did not build the Tesla set until after his death. It was placed in operation in 1950, and since that time the Tesla engineers had been in close touch with spaceships. The space people have visited the Tesla engineers many times, and have told us that Tesla was a Venetian, brought this planet as a baby in 1856, and left with Mr. and Mrs. Tesla in a remote mountain province in what is now Yugoslavia. Mr. Ein Spannell, 1136th Avenue, New York City, in a telephone conversation with the writer during the late evening of January 8, 1943, stated that Nikola Tesla, who's one of the world's outstanding scientists, particularly in the electrical field, and who'd passed away on January 7, 1943, at the Hotel New Yorker Wade maintained his residence. During his lifetime, had conducted many experiments in connection with the wireless transmission of electrical power, what is now commonly called the death ray. Mr. Spannell further stated that the notes and records of Tesla's experiments from Fermali, together with designs of the machinery necessary to vitalize them, are among Tesla's personal effects and that no steps have been taken to preserve them or keep them from falling into the hands of people unfriendly to the war effort and allied nations. Spannell continued by saying that a distant relative of Tesla person who was intensely disliked by Tesla and who came to the United States from Czechoslovakia within the past year by the name of Sava Kozvanovic is taking steps to get possessions of these important documents and plans. Mr. Spannell believes there's a strong likelihood of Sava making this material available to the enemy in the event he is successful. Spannell advised that he's in some kind of governmental work connection with the war effort, which caused him to spend about 5 days each week in the nation's capital. And because of the connections he has made in this capacity, he has seen fit to telephonically notify G2 headquarters in Washington, D.C., as well as Mr. Borkin of the Department of Justice in Washington. Spannell stated that Mr. Borkin advised him that he would immediately make the information available to the director of the FBI, and advised Spannell to lose no time in taking steps to see that Tesla's personal possessions were not disturbed. A few minutes after this conversation, Mr. Spannell had been in communication with Dr. D. Lozando, one of the advisors to Vice President Wallace. After talking with Lozado, he called back to Spannell and told him that the government was virtually interested in the effects of Tesla, particularly those dealing with the wireless transmission of electrical energy in the death ray, and for Spannell to lose no time in doing all he could to preserve them. End quote. What you make of these documents and that the government was so interested in getting hold of Tesla's belongings. Mysterious people easily captivate attention with hidden identities, strange backgrounds, and unusual stories. Their lives appear to be something you find in a mystery novel. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at 3 mysterious individuals. Poe toaster Edgar Allan Poe had an intriguing life, but a secretive figure named by locals as the Poe toaster adds another layer of mystery to the infamous writer. Poe passed away in 1849, aged 40 under mysterious circumstances. However, many years later, a visitor started coming to his grave with an odd ritual. It is disputed what year the Poe toaster started his ritual, with most saying it began in the 1950s. Some believing it started earlier, with another source stating that it started on the centennial of Poe's passing. For 75 years, the visitor attended the grave in Baltimore, Maryland on Poe's birthday, January 19th, with a particular ritual. The Poe toaster would arrive wearing a wide-brimmed black hat with a black coat and white scarf. He poured himself a glass of cognac and recited a brief toast to the deceased writer, before leaving behind the remaining cognac in a bottle, a note, and 3 specifically arranged red roses. The roses were believed to represent Poe, his wife, Virginia, who passed away of tuberculosis, and his mother-in-law, Maria Clem. The significance of the cognac was not immediately clear, but a 2004 note implied that this was a tradition of the toaster's family rather than being related to Poe. There have been many theories as to who the Poe toaster was. A prevailing theory is that it was multiple people rather than just one per enthusiast, or perhaps it was a relative of the prolific master of macabre. A note in 1999 stated that the torch had passed, perhaps alluding to a son taking over his father's work, reiterating a 1993 note that said a torch will be passed. It was reported that whoever took over did not take the tradition as seriously as there, with the Poe toaster sometimes turning up in normal clothes or the note not following the same themes as the originals. The visitor's identity has never been uncovered, but the ritual stopped in 2009 on the bicentennial of Poe's birthday. Despite crowds gathering to witness the Poe toaster's ritual, no one was able or willing to uncover who it was. An obscure photo was published in 1990, which the publication claimed was the Poe toaster. Jeff Giroux, the former curator of the Baltimore Poe House and Museum, has often been thought to be the Poe toaster, but has denied it, while admitting that he knows more about the toaster's identity than anyone else. In 2016, the tradition was resurrected by the Maryland Historical Society, choosing a new person each year through an organized competition to carry out the ritual of the Poe toaster. The identity of the new Poe toaster is kept anonymous each year, keeping it in line with the original, but it is made into more of an event with an audience and festivities. Gil Perez, also known as the 1593 transported soldier, is a well-known Mexican folk legend regarding teleportation. In October 1593, Gil Perez was a Spanish soldier guarding the Palacio del Gobernador in Manila, now known as the Philippines, when he leaned against a wall, closed his eyes because he began to feel dizzy and exhausted, and once he reopened them he was outside Plaza Mayo, now known as Zocalo, Mexico City, mysteriously teleporting over 8,800 miles. The day before the alleged teleportation on the 23rd of October, 1593, the governor, Gómez Pérez das Marinas, was assassinated by his own Chinese rowers while attempting to capture new territory in the Philippines. At the time, parts of the Philippines were under the control of the Spanish. Mexico City was also part of the Spanish Empire. And at the time Pérez arrived, news of the governor's assassination had not yet reached Mexico. Unsure of how to react, Pérez continued to do his guarding duties. Local guards discovered the teleported soldier, and as he was not in the correct uniform, he was arrested and questioned. He was brought to the Viceroy of New Spain, Luis de Velasco, as it was his palace that Pérez teleported to, who was reportedly pleased with the soldier's explanation, while religious officials were not as quick to accept it. As Pérez's story about the assassination and teleportation could not be confirmed, he was charged with desertion and witchcraft and was jailed. He was sent to Santo Domingo to be imprisoned. 2 months later, a ship from Manila with passengers carrying the news of the governor's assassination arrived in Mexico City. Pérez was recalled to Mexico after the ship's arrival confirmed his story. Some of the passengers on the ship recognized Pérez, and he was freed and returned to his garrison in Manila. A lot of this remains a folk legend, with facts that are unable to be verified. The name Gil Pérez cannot be confirmed through primary sources. However, there are records of a nameless soldier detained for witchcraft around the time of the governor's assassination, and this soldier was released several months later. Other accounts of the teleportation have been recorded. One in 1609 by a Spanish soldier called Antonio de Morgue, and another in 1698 by Gaspar de San Agustin, a Spanish clergyman and historian. Pollock twins. Reincarnation, also known as rebirth or transmigration, is one theory about it not being the end when you pass away, believed by many cultures. Some believe that the birth of a set of twins proves that reincarnation is real. On the 5th of May, 1957, a tragedy struck the Pollock family in Hexham, England, and their 2 daughters, 11-year-old Joanna and 6-year-old Jacqueline, passed away their way to church. The girls passed away almost instantaneously, and another child, a friend, passed away on the way to hospital. The driver was a woman who had been forcibly separated from her own children and reportedly tried to take her own life by driving after taking aspirin and phenobarbital. The case made headlines across Britain. On the 4th of October, 1958, Joanna and Jacqueline's mother, Florence Pollock, gave birth to a set of identical children. Twins named Jillian and Jennifer. The similarities between the twins and the deceased girls started to show at birth. The twins, although identical, had different birthmarks. Jennifer had a birthmark on her left hip that was similar to the one that Jacqueline had in the same position. Also, she had a small birthmark on her forehead that resembled a scar Jacqueline got from falling in a bucket aged 3 years old. The parents moved the family to Whitley Bay to get a fresh start before the twins turned 1. As the twins grew, they began to say and remember things that they should not have known. The girls began to ask for their deceased sister's toys by name despite those toys being kept away. Once the twins were 4 years old, the family moved back to Hexham and the strange occurrences continued. The girls were able to name landmarks they had never seen. They knew the favorite locations of their deceased sisters and believed that they had attended school where Jacqueline and Joanna were enrolled when they passed away. The girls were also terrified of cars and running engines. It got stranger. Florence noticed Jennifer and Jillian playing chilling games. Jillian cradled Jennifer's head saying, "There's blood coming out of your eyes." According to their father, John, the twins often talked about the accident between themselves. The twins had similar tastes for foods, clothes, and music as their deceased sisters. However, all memories of their past life seemed to disappear shortly after the twins turned 5. Some people believe that these twins prove that reincarnation is real. Others said the girls were influenced by their older brothers. The twins were studied by a psychologist named Dr. Ian Stevenson, who researched proof of reincarnation in children. They were just one of many cases of reincarnation that the psychologist studied. The twins were covered in one of Stevenson's books, which also contained 13 other cases. In total, Stevenson studied over 2,500 cases of reincarnation over a 40-year career. The question still remains regarding reincarnation, but the case of the Pollock twins is compelling evidence. What do you make of these mysterious individuals and their stories? Aeronautics and Space Administration have made some incredible discoveries in recent years. They've helped us to better understand the cosmos and have inspired generations to look up to the stars. One of the great things about space and space exploration is that a number of cameras have been deployed, and this gives the general public a chance to view some of the most incredible sights our cosmos has to offer. Some of the most well-known ones are the cameras that can be found on the International Space Station and also the SOHO, a spacecraft which is currently orbiting around our sun, and that gives researchers a chance to monitor the sun's behavior. Interestingly, though, in recent years people have managed to snap some interesting objects close to our sun, leaving them confused as to what these huge objects could be. As mentioned, one place where these objects are commonly seen is that of NASA's HelioViewer project. This is used by NASA, other space agencies, and the public to view the sun. But recently, UFO researchers have been using it as a way to try and spot unidentified flying objects. Developed as part of the European Space Agency's and NASA's HelioViewer project, the Solar Heliospheric Observatory allows anyone to view its entire library. And over the years, it's provided some incredible photographs of our sun. However, every so often UFO researchers come forward and present some interesting images. Various websites have just posted an image which allegedly shows a giant cube-like object. They say that whatever this object is, it must be interested in our sun, as it can be seen close to it every couple of weeks or so. This has only caused people to speculate about what this mysterious object is. Some put forward the idea that it may have been leaving our sun, while others who have studied these objects have said they just hover around it and they can be seen leaving the air at high speeds. One UFO researcher called Scott C. Waring was one of the first to post the images, and he believes that this large cube could possibly be a ship, and that in some cases he's even seen these cubes half buried in the sun. So what is it that people are seeing? As of right now, UFO researchers have said they think these crows are not of this world and could be monitoring our planet and watching human civilization. Interestingly, those who've studied these anomalies have said this 2 different times. You have this type that looks kind of transparent and cloaked, then the other version that looks like a giant black cube. UFO researchers have said the large transparent cubes has a kind of cloak on them, and this makes them harder to spot. Whereas the black cubes aren't actually a cube, but were actually placed here by NASA in order to hide something behind it. Some have suggested that these giant cubes are hundreds of miles in length, and that perhaps we may share our sun with these things. They go on to say that for years mysterious objects have been seen in and around our sun. Those who have measured the objects say it ranges from being the size of planet Earth to being even bigger. This is why they rule out that it originates on Earth. One website that looks into these accounts is that of ET Database, and they've suggested in the past that these giant crafts have been over 20 times the size of planet Earth. ET Database has even said that large flares can be seen when these objects exit the sun. Other UFO researchers have pointed out it's one of the best places to see UFOs. Interestingly, they say that different shaped crafts can be seen leaving our sun, and that some of them even stick around for several hours before making a quick getaway. Due to this, amateur researchers have spent countless hours watching these live scenes and looking through old images only to find the same shaped objects close to the sun. One individual said the following about the anomaly seen close to the sun. I've been watching the SOHO cameras for years and I've seen some strange things. This most recent photo, however, is one of the best to come from SOHO, and I think it could be the real deal. For years now, these cameras have been capturing these angel-like crafts, and no one knows what they are. For the past 5 years, they keep appearing at our sun, and no one knows why. End quote. Others, however, are not so sure. They say the following: if this was a real craft, it would be absolutely massive. No object could be that close to the sun due to the heat it gives off. End quote. As of right now, UFO researchers think these crafts have been visiting our sun for years, and even suggest they may be using it as some type of portal. Or that the sun could be a type of fueling station. NASA has provided an official explanation on their Soho page. They say the following: ever since launch, there's been a number of people who've claimed to have seen flying sources and other objects in Soho images. Although some of the supposed pictures of UFOs can seem quite intriguing, they've always turned out to have quite an ordinary cause when examined by experienced Soho scientists. In recent days, we've been receiving so many questions and claims that we'd like to set the record straight. We've never seen anything that even suggests that there's UFOs out there. In the past, we've been accused of covering up UFO evidence when we present our explanations, and of refusing to comment or clamming up when we give up on somebody who won't accept our explanations. While we don't expect to convince everybody, we hope this page and links can provide some information for the curious who want to investigate the claims on their own. Most commonly, UFO claims are due to perfectly natural flaws or artifacts in our publicly available data. Some of the things that people are seeing are planets, cosmic rays, software glitches, and debris. End quote. According to former NASA engineer James Olberg, he went on to say that these objects are just space dandruff floating around in front of cameras. When they appear in front of the cameras, they give off the effect that something much larger is there. When in reality, what people are seeing has a natural origin. He said the following about the discoveries: I've had enough experience with real spaceflight to realize that what's been seen in many videos is nothing beyond the norm. From fully mundane phenomena occurring in unearthly settings. End quotes. So what do you guys make of these giant cubes that are often seen close to our sun? Do you think they're giant objects that are interested in our sun? Or do you think the cube is placed there to hide an object? Or do you believe that NASA are correcting what we're seeing as just processing errors? Going back a few years ago, the Volunteer Fire Protection District in Arkansas received a strange call. Someone told them there was a large hole in the ground that was spitting out flames. Worried that it could have been from an asteroid and could potentially harm someone, the fire chief, Mr. Tucker, made his way to the property. Once he arrived, he could see there was a large hole in the ground, and as described, it was spitting out flames. When it comes to these types of discoveries, officials said it could have only been a few things, but said that is important to conduct further investigations. Tucker said the following: when I got there was flames 8 or 9 feet high shooting out of a hole around 2 feet in diameter. It burned that way for around 30 to 45 minutes before it went out. End quote. While observing the hole, Tucker noticed that it had a sharp turn in it. He revealed that he'd taken the temperature inside the hole and it was around 780 degrees, noting that whatever had caused this hole was still doing damage to the ground. While here, he observed the hole spitting out flames, and when the residents asked him what could have caused the hole to do this, he said he wasn't sure, and went on to say that he'd never seen anything like this before. One of the first things people pointed to was a meteorite. And this is because small meteorites have been recorded as causing a lot of damage when they come into contact with things on our planet. In fact, one well-known recorded incident is when a small meteorite hit the roof of a house in San Carlos, Uruguay. Once it made contact with the house, it went through the roof, bounced off the couch, which caused it to go into another room and destroy a bed and a TV. This meteorite was only a few inches across, but just goes to show how devastating these. NASA said the following on their website: the Earth's atmosphere protects us from the multitude of small debris. These are the size of grains of sandal pebbles, and thousands of which pelt our planet every day. The meteors in our night sky are visible evidence of this small debris burning up high in the atmosphere. In fact, up to a diameter of 10 to 33 meters, most stony meteoroids are destroyed in the atmosphere in thermal explosions. However, around 500 meteorites reach the surface every year. End quote. They went on to say that a meteorite as small as a few meters across could potentially wipe out a whole town. Interestingly though, Tucker went on to say that he didn't think it was a meteorite that caused this damage, going on to say that the site doesn't match that of a typical meteorite impact. saying that there's no signs of dirt having been scuffed up or splashed around the hole's edges. The next theory that was put forward was that the hole could have been created by a lightning storm, and that the hit caused the ground to be lit on fire. This wouldn't be the first time that a lightning strike caused something to be lit on fire. Lightning strikes are known for causing a variety of different objects to catch fire, from trees and grassy areas to things like buildings. Again though, when the residents reported that the hole was created, there was no reports of lightning storms in the area. So this idea is being ruled out. The last idea that was put forward by those who found the hole was that it could have been a groundhog. Although they couldn't provide an answer for how a groundhog would cause this hole to start spitting out flames. Tucker then suggested that the hole could have been created from a gas company that was working in the area. While there was no signs of the flames and fire being caused by a gas explosion, the chief said that the gas company did arrive from the scene to take photographs of the hole. The company was asked about the situation and they said they sent out one of their technicians. A spokesperson for the company said the following. Although Black Hills Energy does not provide natural gas service in Midway, Arkansas, the local fire department contacted us to assist with their fire investigation. Our technicians responded and detected no natural gas in the area. We will continue to partner with the fire department in their investigation as needed. End quote. After these investigations were carried out, not much more was said about the incident, leaving people to wonder what had caused this strange hole to appear. It wasn't just the hole that confused the firefighters, but the fact that it was also spitting out flames for a considerable time while they were there, something they said they had never seen before. Jim Suchula, the Baxter County Office of Emergency Services Director, said that he'd been working on the case and that a recent analysis of soil samples may help to yield some answers. He approached the Arkansas National Guard units that had specialized equipment to test samples taken from the flaming hole. The fire chief explained that when they arrived in the scene, they could see flames that were between 7 and 10 feet high shooting from the ground, and that it took around an hour for them to stop. Once the samples were tested, the National Guard unit said they found levels of xylene toluene, sulfur dioxide, and ethylene dioxide. They said the following about the discovery. That stuff not normally found in the ground. A groundhog certainly didn't produce that. It has to be man-made and put there. Who or why, I don't know. End quote. They went on to say that these chemicals are something found in flammable gels. They went on to say the following. We think it was like a chimney effect. As it was burning, it was pulling air through the hole and making the flames rise up. What most likely happened here was that people were messing around with these flammables and it got out of hand. They noted that the discovery was made on private property. Whoever added in these chemicals probably didn't see much of an effect. Then suddenly the hole opened up and the chimney effect happened, causing flames to be spat out. Officials said they're glad they could get to the bottom of this mystery, and just said that they're glad that nobody got hurt, but also issued a warning saying that these flammables should not be played with. So what do you make of this interesting discovery?